Now, before I introduce another speaker, is Randall Thomas present?
Yes.
Yes, wonderful. So let me introduce you.
Okay. Okay. That's
so,
fine.
Randall Thomas is Chief Survey Methodologist and SVP. I don't actually know what SVP is, but maybe you can help me. At Ipsos Public Affairs.
Right.
So, oh, VP is Vice President, right?
Right,
so
right,
Survey Vice President. How is that?
Yep.
Yeah. At Ipsos, he provides methodological leadership for the company in web-based and digital research methods to ensure high-quality, accurate research for both non-probability and probability-based samples. And today he will talk about aiming for the bullseye. Does the use of targeted sample improve probability-based sample? So go ahead.
Well, thank you. Yes, SVP just happens to be senior, so it's one it's one of the uses, I guess, in the United States that we use. But my main position is as Chief Survey Methodologist. So I look at specifically issues of questionnaire design, but in the past 10 years, I've been working on ABS custom sample building as well. So I'd also like to thank my colleagues that we've had many discussions over the years and debates. Francis Barlas, Kathleen Santos, Mansour Fahimi, and Christopher Fleury. And let's see if I can, oops, I might be in the wrong, can you see my slides, I guess, first, make sure of that. Yes. And if so, there. So one of the things I have grown accustomed to is in ABS samples, we use stratification. And the stratification typically implies some amount of targeting of sample that fits certain characteristics of interest. Typically targeted samples we create using information associated with the addresses, which could be location information. So something like income levels in a given zip code or race ethnicity issues within a zip code. And based upon that location information, we can concentrate selection within certain areas. Other types of information that's used for targeting is commercial-based information that's been appended to the addresses. And it can include information that comes from scanner data at grocery stores, magazine subscriptions, coupons. They buy up all sorts of lists and associate with addresses, and then these lists are appended to the information. And there's also a variety of imputation that allows our sample providers to infer associations with the targeted information. So we can use this information to create samples or partition the frame with members who might have this information, and there's higher levels of certainty that they have the characteristics that are of interest. And typically what we find is that using targeted information can reduce cost of mailings because it can enhance the incidence rates that we're interested in fairly dramatically. So when we look at cost constraints on most ABS projects, use of targeted sample, as I mentioned, becomes commonplace in order to try to improve the representation of low incidence participants. There are many reasons, though, that individuals from targeted samples might be different from people in non-targeted samples, and that includes that these people use coupons, often reside at the address for a longer period of time, purchase products of interest at a higher rate, and therefore they get caught in the web of targeting, or they shop at higher income stores that are using tracking their purchases on scanner data. We had an opportunity to do a study that will allow us to directly compare targeted and non-targeted ABS samples, focusing on recruiting cigarette smokers. Primary goal of the study was to compare nature of smokers obtained from a general population sample with those obtained from a targeted smoker stratum. So just to review some ideas here, it was a push to web design. We had both English and Spanish versions. Average response rate was 9.3%, and it fielded in 2018. And we had over 40,000 completes. We had a number of different protocols for mailing, as well as for incentives that are shown here. And we partitioned the sample in a number of ways. We drew this simple random sample from the frame of existing household addresses, and then from the unselected addresses, we then partitioned 4 different strata, at least one smoker in the household, Hispanic 18 to 29, other 18 to 29, and the complement, the rest of the folks. You see here the frame elements, how they were divided up in terms of sample 1, and then sample 2 were the strata, 4 strata, and then sample 2 overall. The sample that was pulled randomly from these strata, the completes for each strata, the breakoffs for each strata, the survey yield, which is we could calculate completes plus breakoffs divided by the total sample. So it doesn't include the bounce backs in terms of males. And then the completion rates, completes for as a total of completes plus breakoffs. And then we asked a number of questions about the household informant. We got essentially the census of other adult household members. For those who smoke cigarettes, including the household informant, we randomly selected 1 to talk about issues related to nicotine and demographics. In the results, here's some characteristics of the primary household informant. So we see that people who were the household informant for the general population typically had more younger folks, 18 to 29, whereas those with targeted smokers had fewer younger folks there. You see that the targeted smokers also had a little lower college, college and over, and they were lower on Hispanic. Obviously, the Hispanic strata had, that was 18 to 29, had higher levels of 18 to 29, and also had a higher Hispanic, and the other group was 18 to 29, had also higher 18 to 29. And overall, sample 2 overall had a lower rate of college than the general population sample 1. And then these are additional demographics of the household, and you see some major differences with regard to smoking in the at least one smoker there, but we go to characteristics of the selected smoker. So these of the adults who smoked, these are the characteristics of the smoker in the household. They were more female, less likely to be young, less likely to be Hispanic, following through what we found for general population. So people who have one smoker in the household that are identified tend to be a little bit different than the general population. But as you roll them all up in sample 2, the differences sort of disappear. They're more modest. In addition, we see that selected smokers are more likely to be married, not having moved, which is somewhat we expect with targeted sample, and higher likelihood of being obese. We weighted the data for smokers to weighting targets for smokers, and this is sort of the key slide that we see that smoker strata smokes more cigarettes, they are more likely to smoke every day, and they have a lower interest in quitting smoking. For the discussion, we'll just go right to the key consideration. When considering use of targeted sample, we should be careful considering how the targeting information was identified or obtained and how that could correlate with the key variables of interest of the study. Otherwise, it could be biased. Currently, we're looking at studies that use location information and not ancillary data as much to see if we can try to improve the reduction of biases that we've seen with targeted samples. And that concludes my 10 minutes. If you want the paper, you can, of course, send me an email and request it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.